All right, welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. Our special coverage of the Sean Diddy Combs status hearing that happened today outside of or inside of New York Federal Court. I'm Jesse Weber, and right now we're going to go live to outside of that federal courthouse because our very own Elizabeth Millner is there. She was inside the courtroom for all the action today. Elizabeth, good to see you. So what were the main takeaways? What happened inside that courtroom? And if you can give us a little flavor of what did you observe from the man himself, Sean Combs?
Yeah, Jesse, it was pretty interesting because I think, we have seen many photos, videos of Sean Combs, aka Diddy, through the Associated Press, through Instagram. And so to see him kind of in person after being in jail for 3 weeks now was pretty interesting, to say the least. And I say that by being that you would expect him to feel a little defeated, a little gaunt, anything like that. But it wasn't that case. He appeared confident. He stood tall. But most importantly and most notably, when he walked inside the courtroom, the first thing that he looked at was his family. As soon as he saw his family, he just lit up. Another thing to note, too, is he wasn't shackled, but he was wearing a khaki prison-like jumpsuit when he appeared inside court, and his family appeared on their end very just happy to see him. Now, I will say when I was inside the courtroom, I was a little bit towards the back right side of the gallery, and so for seeing Sean Combs, I had to look through a few heads and stuff like that, but again, he appeared just kind of confident walking inside that courtroom, and it might have just been the look that his family was there. So let me kind of paint a picture for you as well too. His mother arrived a little bit before 1 p.m. Eastern time today, and then whenever his children actually came into the courtroom or the courthouse actually kind of got silent. It was pretty interesting to see that as well too. So as far as who was sitting by who, you had Janice Combs, who sat by Justin, then it was followed by Chance, the twins, Jesse and Delilah, Quincy, and then Christian Combs, aka King. And so again, once they all saw their father, they all smiled at him, waved at him. And even when we were all leaving the courthouse today, Diddy just blew kisses at his mother and his family members. They didn't say much of anything. I wasn't outside when they had first entered the courthouse, so I'm not sure if they said anything to the press. Previously, they had been very quiet whenever they had entered the courtroom, so I assume it'll be kind of like that as well too. But it was interesting as well that a lot of the arguments kind of based around the data that was recovered and seized from the homes. So while a lot of us were kind of expecting there to be arguments about the bail or the bond, that really didn't happen, and the judge ordered that the defendant, Sean Combs, stay inside the MDNC, which we know the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. And so as far as what we know now is that we know May 5th is going to be the date, tentatively, that the trial does begin. So we have a lot of stuff that we're expecting to see, but kind of going back to a little bit of the evidence there. Now, I'm looking through this notebook right here, mainly because we're not allowed to have electronic equipment when we're inside that courtroom. So all of this was handwritten notes. So just kind of going over just some of the things that were happening inside that courtroom. I'm sure you have already talked about it there as far as just all the data that prosecutors and now have in connection to the case. So 96 electronic devices were seized across 3 different locations. That included Diddy's Miami home, his LA mansion, as well as all the devices that were seized whenever he went to the airport. Because as we all remember, when the search warrants were happened, he was actually boarding a flight with his twin daughters, including, and I believe Chance was there as well too, his 18-year-old daughter now, when they were the search warrants were happening and Diddy was caught up at the airport. They did seize different devices that time as well too. And so the data mainly still has to be extracted. Now, the government was kind of talking about just some of the devices are a little bit older, so the government in turn is kind of catching up to the technology there. But they say at the airport they seized 9 different devices. 7 of those have been extracted so far. At Miami, 36 different devices were seized. 29 were extracted. And in LA, 51 devices were seized. 24 have been extracted. They say the 8 terabytes of data, that information could come about in the next 2 weeks or so, and they're working on the production, another production of the subpoena returns. And so the defense pretty much didn't object to too much inside the courtroom today. Agnifilo also appeared kind of confident during his arguments. I know a lot of people were kind of expecting for the bail or bond argument to be happening, but that didn't happen, and it appeared that the defense kind of, or excuse me, I'm trying to find the right word here, but they were pretty much complying with all the prosecution's arguments and plan to kind of have everything all good and set to go by May. Now, by the time the end of the year is to happen, I forgot like one big turn right here. They did mention that a potential superseding indictment could come. Now, obviously that hasn't happened yet, but the investigation is still ongoing. And so, we don't know a lot of information as far as what that could look like, but it appears that we could expect more charges to come later on, potentially by the end of the year.
That is what we've been echoing a lot, that we wouldn't be surprised if there's a superseding indictment, and I don't know. I don't think that May date is going to stick if he's hit with additional charges. That's just my guess. Elizabeth Millner, thank you so much. Great reporting, and happy you got a chance to be in that courtroom and also lay out the scene for us as well. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Good seeing you.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, so now we're going to break it down. I'm joined once again by our general counsel here at Law&Crime, Elizabeth Vulai, but also I am joined by criminal defense attorney Nima Rahmani. Good to see you. Thanks so much. Happy to have you both here. Nima, I'll start with you. I mean, the idea of a May 2025 trial date, and we talked about it before on the show, that Sean Combs, if he thinks he's going to be locked up, obviously wants to go to trial as soon as possible. I get it. He's kind of putting the prosecution's feet to the fire. But you heard Elizabeth. Terabytes of data, all this to go through, a production schedule. This really going to happen in May, this trial?
Probably not, but Diddy's lawyers may want to jam up the government if they think there's any chance they're not ready in terms of presenting the electronic evidence or getting their witnesses lined up. It may be part and parcel of the defense's strategy to push this case to trial as quickly as possible. Obviously, we know Combs is in custody, so there's really no point for him to wait. We know that the defense case is going to be limited. When Judge Subramanian asked for a time estimate today, the prosecution gave 3 weeks. The defense only gave 1 week, which means that they're going to base this case mostly on cross-examination. So what they probably want to do is push this case as quickly as possible, because we know under the Speedy Trial Act, unless they waive time or time is excluded, the government technically has to get this to trial within 70 days.
So let me just follow up on that. If he's hit with a superseding indictment, right, and we don't know what those charges could be, we don't know if there could be multiple defendants, we don't know if they're respect to potentially minors. No, am I crazy to think that there's no way this trial is then going to happen in May?
It's unlikely, especially if there's a superseding indictment involving minors, because minors present a completely different set of circumstances. Because we know through his lawyers, Combs is arguing that the sexual activity happened, but it was consensual. Of course, for sex trafficking, you need one of those three elements: force, fraud, or coercion. Obviously, minors cannot consent to any sexual activity, so that would be a very different defense entirely. The defense would have to be that the activity didn't happen at all and the individuals are lying. So I think that's going to be the potential game changer if we do get the minors wrapped up into a superseding indictment. And we know, at least if you believe the civil attorneys, there are 25 minor victims, one of which is as young as 9.
And those suits haven't been filed yet, but that's what Tony Busby, this Texas attorney, has indicated that we should expect to see in these lawsuits. Elizabeth, I want to go to you. So as our other Elizabeth said, there was nothing about bail. And that's not surprising, because that issue of bail has now been appealed to a different court, to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. I was going over the paperwork from Sean Combs' attorneys. We have two questions about that. Number one, from Simply Sarah on YouTube, his lawyer did file bail paperwork. Yes. This is the second question. This is from Simply Sarah. Oh, Simply Sarah had two bail questions. Second one is, was this his last chance for bail? Meaning the paperwork that he just filed.
Yeah, so they filed paperwork basically appealing the decision of the two prior judges denying him bail to the Second Circuit. And, technically, if they're denied, they do have another higher court, the U.S. Supreme Court, to go to, but I think that's very unlikely. I think this would be the final stop, them appealing to the Second Circuit.
What do you think of his arguments? And let me just lay out what some of these arguments are. So first, they say, we have presented a very attractive bail package. We have put $50 million secured by two properties, 24/7 security monitoring from an outside security firm, no access to phone, no access to internet, visitor logs, whatever other conditions you want to put. And they also said in their paperwork, Sean Combs knew he was under investigation since January. His attorneys immediately reached out to the Southern District of New York, even before there were raids, before there was charges, was trying to be as cooperative as possible. He surrendered his passport to his attorneys. His family members surrendered their passports. He tried to sell his plane. He came to New York to surrender himself for the charges. And he says that all these allegations that he was reaching out to victims and witnesses, either A, it can't be corroborated, prosecution hasn't presented enough evidence, or B, it was innocuous conversations. It wasn't something sinister, as the prosecution alleges. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument to make. I understand why they stated that. You know, the former judge that was presiding over this case had said when he denied him the application for bail was there's no guarantee that he won't try to obstruct justice in some way, whether that's, you know, removing or tampering with physical evidence, intimidating witnesses possibly, and there could be a strong likelihood of that. You know, what was in the indictment and what a lot of the complaints are based on is a pattern of controlling behavior that he displayed. So you don't know if that behavior could spill over to trying to prevent witnesses from coming forward, speaking. And I also think this is a case that's going to rely heavily on physical evidence. The video of Cassandra Ventura being one. It's alleged that he filmed a lot of these activities that are at issue now. So there's always that risk. And if I was the prosecutor, I would be worried about that.
Nima, that's really, really great points.